I've got a telephone call. I hope I've got you. Are you still there, Zeke?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so everything's working fine. I have to
I just
tell
heard
you.
my voice echo.
Yeah. Well, I can't do anything about that. You might hear your voice echo.
Okay, I can deal with it.
Okay. Is it different from the way it usually is when you call me?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Well, I never heard my voice echo before.
Okay. Well, if you can read along and not have to worry about it, maybe if you hold the phone away from your ear while you're reading and use it more as a microphone, if it becomes a problem, then do that.
Oh, it isn't a problem. It's not that bad.
I have to tell you, I'm having a little problem that I don't want to go into detail about, but I'm finding out that there's something wrong with my connection to KMEC, and I need to find an email address so that I can contact Sid Cooperrider and get that solved, because I was just told that I'm on KNYO and everything's working fine. But
well, your voice just a few moments ago is only half the volume now.
I see. Okay, well, I haven't changed anything. The problem has nothing to do with that. It's that KMEC apparently didn't grab the stream in progress, and so my show isn't on KMEC also, as well as KNYO tonight. But instead, they're playing reggae music, and so that's particularly galling because you know how I feel about reggae music. So, Zeke, you've got a story to read. Go for it. And if you give me some example, some idea before you start about how long you're going to be so that I know when to come back to the microphone and take over.
8 minutes.
You're telling me only 8 minutes? Are you kidding? For last week's part that I didn't read and also this week's?
Well, I wasn't going to include the second part till next week now.
Well, I don't know. If you think you can get it all together in like 20 or so minutes, then why don't you just go ahead and read all the way through?
Okay, well, the second one is longer, so I would probably, if I do that, I would probably stop in the middle of it and continue the next week. Okay,
do whatever you need to do and holler for me when you get to the end of what you're going to do so that I know to come away from the other place in here.
Well, let's say I read for up to 15 minutes.
Okay, I'll come back in 15 minutes. I can do that.
Yeah, I have the clock before me, so I can tell, too.
Great. We're all on the same page, chronosynclastic infundibulum-wise.
Yeah. So I'm good to go now.
Okay, Ezekiel J. Kralin on KNYOLP Fort Bragg, if not KMECLP Ukiah.
All right, this is from my self-published novel, Free Me From This Bond, Chapter 5, The Final Gift. Allow me to show you the latest gift I will soon present to my beloved Arwen. Click on any image for a larger view. Awesome reader, I am at an impasse. No way can I duplicate the outstanding images for this chapter in book format that I can on the web. That is beyond my ken financially. Even so, they do not lend themselves well to either black and white or the much smaller size required to fit in a standard book. I therefore beg your forgiveness when I point you to a URL in order to view these incredible snapshots online, which require a computer monitor's full-size screen in order to grasp their beauty. tinyurl.com/latest-gift. But even without access to cyberspace, you will get the gist of this chapter and be inspired by the tale written herein. Folder contains episodes from my latest novel, Free Me From This Bond, Chapters 3, Sweet Sue, 8, Dragon Prophecy, and 9, Dragon Fire in the Hole. Left out 3 other completed chapters because they are not pertinent to my blessed relationship with my darling guardian dragon, Arwen Miles, and I am running low on printer ink, which is rather expensive. I am presently typing Chapter 13, The Phone Call, which may or may not be added to this folder depending on how soon I can deliver this gift to my sweetheart and whether or not there's enough ink left in my printer. Photo number 3 shows my newest chapters in the left pocket, and in the right is a graphic novel about America's war machine and why it is so destructive to its citizens and to our troubled world at large. Really, it's intended as a gift of appreciation to Randolph Louis Taylor and not to Arwen Miles. tremulous reader, for reasons which should be obvious to you if you've been following my tale since Chapter 1, the small white envelope contains a business card that promotes my latest novel. Photo number 4 is addressed to Randolph instead of Arwen, for I know their spirits are intertwined, and that lover number 1, Randolph, has brought lover number 2, Arwen, to heal my bleeding heart of great sorrow for the love of a suffering Vietnam veteran, number 1. Don't know if you can see this, but in photo number 4 in fine point pen, I added in the lower middle right, "Thank you for bringing me to him." This is in reference to my other great love, Randolph, for bringing Arwen to me, but it also acknowledges a near future prophecy where Arwen will bring me back to my beloved Randolph, who suddenly disappeared from my life since 1992, through whatever magical dimension that is his power, which I call dragon sorcery. I really can't speak enough praise over what a noble and dear dragon is my darling Arwen. Suffice it to say, he is infinitely beloved by yours truly. FYI, if you still need to learn about my excellent association with Randolph Taylor, go here, The Somalian Affair, tinyurl.com/Somalia-Taylor. Why it's called The Somalian Affair will become evident after a little perusal of that dragon divinely inspired page. Or for a briefer account, this poem, September's Passage, which you can read in Chapter 14. Photos number 5 and 6 are just the reverse side. A skull-themed bandana, a skull-themed bandana binds the folder. Those painted feathers, by the way, were found in a curb on Noe Street while walking home. Discarded, no doubt, after a fun day by one of numerous revelers at San Francisco's annual Bay to Breakers Run. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, gee, silly me. I almost forgot to mention the other items I've included in this folder, and which are very, very special. Click on any image for a larger view. Patient reader, again, I desperately require you to visit my online version to view the images described here and below. My profuse apologies. tinyurl.com/VAMC-folder. On the left side are the original handwritten letters I composed in 1985 while visiting my Randolph after he shot himself and where he was hopefully recuperating. There was no certain conclusion that his hospital bed at the VAMC in Washington, D.C. would not also become his deathbed. Those letters were interviews I held with various other patients there who were also non-vets and, after returning back from that conflict, became, like Randolph, anti-war activists. What I did was carry a concealed tape recorder into the building and have each veteran tell his story. Each night upon returning to my hotel room, I'd play the recordings back and handwrite all the details. The next morning, I'd make a photocopy of this journal and mail these duplicates to Warren Hinkle, a news reporter back in SF who agreed to receive my daily reports. This way, if I got caught, Warren would have at least some vital info that could blow the scandal wide open. Sean H., you remember all this, I'm sure. You were still residing in the same apartment building as myself. In fact, I had just moved in there 2 years earlier. You recall how I had no money to fly out there until that miracle happened. My first computer ever, a compact, luggable 28 pounds, was stolen by those two rapscallions who I let live with me for a week before they could move into a new rental. I was so upset, never dreaming I'd collected my insurance, so I forgot all about it. Then Randolph shoots himself. A potent dream where angels instructed me to fly out to D.C. or he'll die made me worry how I'd ever get the moolah to do just that. Don't worry, these angels affirmed. The money will come to you at the right time. Well, lo and behold, the insurance payment that I forgot all about did show up 2 months later, $2,850. More than enough to jet out to D.C., rent a budget hotel room, eat out, buy Randolph some gifts, and more. And you remember how I trusted curly, golden-haired Brian to stay in my SRO and keep things tidy? No guests whatsoever. especially not that biatch Carrie. Boy, did he make a mess of things. Or really, I should say she. Sadly, Mr. Hinkle did nothing with my papers. In fact, he never communicated with me ever again, despite my several phone calls to him when I got back. As far as I know, he is still sitting on these documents, or more likely, just tossed them into the trash. Those letters are testimonials citing medical abuse and neglect by hospital staff towards those soldiers who spoke out against our occupation of Vietnam. One such patient who suffered seizures was locked away and ignored until he finally died the next day. I believe they also intended the same fate for Randolph. Fortunately, I discovered his whereabouts thanks to the help of a local priest, Father Young, Church of the Most Holy Redeemer here in the Castro, who had contacts back east. Ministers, priests, rabbis, and the like can visit places otherwise verboten to your average citizen. Once I blew the whistle by publicizing Randolph's location and begging folks to send him letters and cards of concern, love, and support, the hospital knew the jig was up, and they were forced to take good care of him. How did I expose their skullduggery? By sending my grievous appeal as a letter to the editor to every major newspaper in each of our 50 states. On the right side of the open folder are displayed 3 cards, all written to Randolph but never really mailed. I did this sometimes just to soothe my aching soul for lack of him. The topmost card shows a dog gazing down at a feline. Open this card to find a poem called Prayer of the Cat. Lord, I am the cat. It is not exactly that I have something to ask of you. No, I ask nothing of everyone. But if you have by some chance, in some celestial barn, a little white mouse or a saucer of milk, I know someone who would relish them. Wouldn't you like some day to put a whole curse on the race of dogs? If so, I should say amen. Prayers from the Ark, the Creatures Choir by Carmen Bernot de Gas. This quote is an exact copy from one of Randolph's earliest letters to me while recuperating from that self-inflicted bullet wound, right down to the little sketch of a cat's head. The bottommost card depicts 2 polar bears, youngster riding the back of an adult. Open this card to see. To my beloved Randolph, your tops, Pops. I can't bear to be away from you, even for a moment. Most affectionately, Ursa Minor, Zeke. Below my handwritten praise, you'll find a photo of yet another card depicting barnyard animals gathered around the manger of baby Jesus. It is a Christmas card, of course, and the very last writing of any sort that Randolph sent to me. For a long time, I had it glued to a red background and kept it hung on the wall right over my bed's pillow. Inside, the card read, "May the sweet spirit of Christmas be with you all year long," and signed simply, Randy. No return address, but the postal stamp indicated it was mailed from here in San Francisco. I called the local VAMC and other hospitals to see if I could track him down. Alas, no luck. I wept. Finally, the central card depicts a luminous painting entitled The Night of the Holy Grail by Frederick Judd Waugh. My quest for Randolph's redemption is indeed my very own personal Holy Grail. Open the card to read, "What more can I say? You have won for your heart the Holy Grail. You are a brave Randolph, liberated from the shackles of earthly woes. Semper Fidelis, Zeke." So there you have it, my recent gift, or gifts actually, to beloved Arwen. I entrust him with these papers and those 3 undelivered cards. Why? Because I know in my heart that Arwen's gift is to deliver me back unto Randolph in some way which is unfathomable at this time. It is obviously no less than a major miracle. Randolph will receive my VAMC documents and these cards, and thus my great odyssey come full circle. Only now, not with just one great love in my life, but 2. I challenge anyone to defy my claim that I am the luckiest and happiest man in the entire cosmos, not just planet Earth. Should you be such a one, I warn you right now, your mission is futile. So now I'm opening the page for, hold on, I gotta lower the phone to enlarge the font here, hold on. Control. Okay, so now I'm gonna read the first part of chapter 6 called VAMC Interviews. Pensive reader, it's important at this point to note Randolph Taylor's selfless act of fasting for 40 days in 1984 that Vietnam veterans be represented at San Francisco's Democratic National Convention of the same year. I would also like to point out that our then mayor, Dianne Feinstein, refused to support his noble fast, declaring it an act of self-violence. Sadly, while the Democratic Party seemed to finally acquiesce to Randolph's wish, they betrayed him at the last moment and banned him or any other non-vet from speaking on the floor. This cruel outcome was largely responsible for Randolph feeling so disheartened that he attempted suicide less than a year later. To view a news article about his fast, visit this URL, tinyurl.com/rtaylor-fast. Okay, peoples, here's a typed copy of all 22 pages of my interviews of non-vet patients at the VAMC Hospital in Washington, D.C., way back in 1985. If you haven't read the previous chapter, Latest Gift, please do so now. This will save me from having to repeat myself in this article. Once you read Chapter 5, you'll have a good grasp on what these interviews are all about. Don't know what took me so long to release them after Mr. Hinkle's failure to follow through. Anyways, here goes. For an added bonus, you may view the original document in all its handwritten glory here, tinyurl.com/VAMC-interviews. Unlike the handwritten letter in Chapter 1, these pages were scribed on a yellow pad, thus the background is too dark to reproduce in print. Please note that I changed my name in 1996 from Gene Catalano to Zeke Kralin. These interviews predate my new name. For proof of name change, visit tinyurl.com/Gene, Gene, -2, Zeke, Zeke. April 10th, 1985. On April 4th, 1985, at 7:15 a.m., a veteran patient, Mr. Montgomery, approximately 55 years old, died of a heart attack. He was admitted to Ward 2D East, Bed 6, about a week earlier, complaining of chest pains. The night before his death, he complained of chest pains to student doctors and nursing assistants who paid no attention. He received no medical attention that night and consequently died in the morning. Randy wants immunity to be granted to veteran patients at the VA hospital so they may speak without fear about the abusive and neglectful treatment of the hospital that causes untold suffering and death. Randolph Taylor is numbered among the ones who suffer from neglect and may die because of this neglect. April 12, 1985. On April 11th, Vietnam veteran Randolph Taylor was dealt a cruel blow. The VA hospital psychologist, Dr. Zager, declared Mr. Taylor to be potentially homicidal. He based this conclusion on an inkblot test in which Randy described two inkblots as resembling the caricatures of Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon. Dr. Zager concluded that since two political figures were included in Randy's inkblot test, he could be homicidal. I consider Dr. Zager's prognosis unfounded, cruel, and atrocious. I know Randy to be a very gentle and caring soul and have never heard him talk of harming anyone in any way. It seems to me that Mr. Taylor is a victim of persecution for his outspoken criticism of the VA hospital and possibly for being gay. It is doubly cruel for Randy to suffer such an accusation as he is already under considerable stress, both for his post-traumatic stress and for any possible medical mistreatment or neglect. Randy has already contributed much to the hospital by his kindness to fellow veteran patients, for the hospital staff in his ward, 2D East, have become somewhat more humane to their gay and AIDS patients. This inkblot test was the same one given to Randy 12 years ago, and he likewise identified two blots as resembling Nixon and Johnson. May I point out that during this 12-year interim, Mr. Taylor has never raised a hand against anyone. Isn't this proof positive that he is not homicidal? Randy considers his reaction to these two ink blots a rejection of the politics of his time during the Vietnam War. Dr. Zager is contributing potential damage to Randy's case, and a second status hearing is scheduled for May 1st, 1985. Even if the judge should bypass the doctor's prognosis, that fact of a homicidal accusation could destroy Randy's future when it comes to seeking work and any further legal involvement. The ramifications of this character defamation could go quite far in its injury to Randy's recovery. April 14th, 1985. Randy's left leg is lame due to a blockage of circulation. After examination, which didn't occur for several weeks after Randolph Taylor's original complaint, the doctor thinks the blockage is in an aorta. Randolph was told that he'd be examined by a cardiovascular specialist shortly, but almost 2 weeks have now passed since they told him that. April 15th, 1985. This morning, the nursing staff told Randolph to remain in the hospital as the cardiovascular specialist would examine him today, but the specialist never showed up, and it is now evening. I found out the following information from Randolph Taylor today. Jeff Miller, a young veteran about 24 years old, came into the VA hospital last week and was admitted to Ward 2D West. He was checked out AMA, against medical approval, on April 12, 1985. He went home, shot himself, and died. Not as yet confirmed, another veteran on April 11th in Ward 2D West was put in restraints and left to die. Several weeks ago, Randolph Taylor was given the wrong medication when he left the hospital for weekend leave. Instead of Valium, they gave him Dilantin, which could have given him seizures had he taken it, which he did not. But he went without medication for his heart during the entire weekend. Meanwhile, the patient who was supposed to get Dilantin for his weekend leave got Randolph's Valium instead. Fortunately, this patient had some spare Dilantin on him, which he takes to prevent seizures. This mishap of drugs, according to the patients, is an everyday incident at the VA hospital in Washington, D.C., as are improper dosages, overuse of lithium when much safer drugs can be used, and illegal trafficking of drugs on the part of some medical employees. According to Randolph, more deaths happened in this hospital than he experienced in Vietnam over the same period of time. He claims that many veterans at this hospital suffer and or die unnecessarily because of abusement treatment or neglect. Regarding Randy's possible aorta malfunction, it causes Randy to grow weak and exhausted several times a day, forcing him to go to bed and rest. Randy is extremely distraught and saddened by the hospital's cruel treatment and neglect, causing unnecessary hardship and death, and by a psychologist's accusation that he is homicidal by nature. Randy wonders how soon he will die, yet he keeps fighting for his survival and release from the hospital. After his trial, he is determined to expose the VA hospital's criminal negligence to the media. Randy is folding paper into cranes, inspired by a true story he read called 1,000 Cranes, about a Japanese girl with radiation poisoning who believed the legend that if you make 1,000 paper cranes, you will recover from any illness you have. After folding a little over 600 cranes, she died. Randy's gentle nature and faith is an inspiration to me. April 16, 1985. I visited California Congresswoman Sala Burton's office on April 12, 1985, and spoke with her assistant, Michael Moran. I told him of Randolph Taylor's serious condition and of the medical neglect and abuse he and other patients are enduring, including unnecessary deaths. He said he will look into ordering a secret investigation and have one of Burton's representatives visit Randy at the hospital. He said he'd get back to me that day, Friday, but he never did. I phoned Mr. Moran today, Tuesday, April 16th, and he said that he is composing a letter regarding hospital abuse and corruption for Randy Taylor specifically and the patients in general to the Chief Medical Director of the Veterans Administration, Donald Custis. He directs all of the VA hospitals in this nation. Also, Mr. Moran said that Randy does not want any of Burton's representatives to visit him. He only wants Burton herself to visit. Randy told me that this is not true. He'd be glad to have any representative visit. Randy never told Mr. Moran not to have a representative visit. Bill Brew, Director of Veterans Affairs for California Senator Cranston's office, is unwilling to visit Randy or other patients at the VA hospital in Washington, D.C., nor is he interested in sending out a representative on pushing for a secret investigation of the hospital, even though I informed him with specifics of the medical abuse occurring there. He told me that the patients are free to contact him regarding any complaints, and their names will remain confidential. I told Mr. Brew that apparently these patients are still too scared to come forward, that they should be granted immunity and be interviewed. Mr. Brew showed no interest in my suggestions. His attitude of, they can come to us, but we won't come to them, is alarmingly discouraging, especially since these problems are right up his alley as Director of Veterans Affairs. My personal visit and conversation with Bill Brew took place on April 12th. Randolph Taylor had or still has skin cancer from exposure to Agent Orange in the Vietnam War. Some time ago, he was given tablets of beta-carotene, which has proved beneficial to many patients suffering from Agent Orange skin cancer. This administering of beta-carotene is part of a government medical experiment, which includes all the VA hospitals. Yet, when Randy was admitted to the VA hospital in Washington, D.C., this hospital took away his beta-carotene supply and has no intention of giving it back to him at any future time. Walking through the hospital corridors, I have heard patients mumbling about how neglectful and abuseful this hospital is regarding medical care. I've spoken with some of these patients, and they can tell me many true stories of patient abuse similar to what Randy has told me. Some of these stories include unnecessary and cruel deaths and vicious beatings by some of the guards and other personnel. On April 12th, I visited California Congresswoman Barbara Boxer's office. The secretary said that both Boxer and her aide were out of the city and wouldn't be back till sometime next week. I phoned Boxer's office on April 16th, 1985, and spoke with Doris Stupp, an assistant to Boxer involved in Veterans Affairs. I told her the story about Randy and the other patients, and she showed extreme interest. I have an appointment with her tomorrow at 1 p.m. Randy told me that the letters he's received from California Senator Cranston and California Congresswoman Boxer have been copied and mailed to press agencies, including AP and UPS. In order to prevent harm to his May 1st hearing, the press is sitting on this information until after Randy goes to court. The contributions or lack of same by politicians on Randy's behalf will all be exposed in the media. Randy says that patients in the VA hospital psychiatric ward are denied proper medical treatment, even though most of them require medical as well as psychiatric care if they are to recover and avoid torment and or death. Also, the intercoms in the psychiatric ward blast loud and frequently, jittering the nerves of already distraught patients, many of whom are suicidal. April 17th, 1985. While in the long run the corruption in the VA hospital in D.C. will be exposed, Randolph Taylor may die, for he needs immediate quality medical care, which is being denied him. How many more veterans will suffer and needlessly die at the hands of these selfish, uncaring doctors and nurses? I have started keeping count. I feel helpless in my search to get Randy proper medical care fast, and I know that he could die at any moment. I have yet to discover how I can accomplish this without endangering Randy's medical and legal condition. Today I spoke with Doris Stupp, Barbara Boxer's assistant, regarding Veterans Affairs. I filled her in on Randy Taylor's situation and gave her a copy of some of my notes on the hospital's neglect and abuse. I also spoke with Boxer's aide, Claudette Josephson, who suggested I write a one-page note to Ms. Boxer for Doris Stupp to leave on her desk. They let me type it in their office. Ms. Boxer is leaving D.C. again tomorrow until the 22nd, and I'll be leaving on the 23rd. This is all so frustrating and sad. April 18th, 1985. The hospital director, A.A. Gavazzi, seems to be the main plug to any humane improvements at the VA hospital in Washington, D.C. I spoke in the canteen with another patient who is debilitated by alcoholism. He is 34 years old and is intelligent, attractive, and kind. It seems that his alcoholism was a result of noises in his head that came from shooting cannons while he was enlisted. He says no one is treating him for this painful and debilitating neurosis, even though he is a patient of the VA hospital. Like Randy, he has many true horror stories to tell of criminal negligence on the part of the VA hospital. After over a 3-week wait, a cardiovascular specialist, Dr. Levi, finally examined Randy. I was present. Dr. Levi only gave Randy a cursory 5-minute examination, then abruptly walked away. Randy thought the doctor had to rush off to another patient, but Randy found him a few minutes later watching television on his ward in the recreation room. When a commercial came on, Randy tried to ask some questions, but Dr. Levi just told him to go away. Randy tells me that occupational therapy uses patients to do work that hospital employees should actually be doing. He also claims that donations to patients may very likely be confiscated by the nursing staff for their own enjoyment. For example, the ladies' auxiliary left extra food for the patients one day, but the nurses shortly after took the food away, claiming it was intended for the nursing staff. Regarding immunity, Randy says immunity should not only be granted to patients, but to employees who would then speak about hospital abuse and neglect. April 19th, 1985. Randy had planned to spend this weekend with me, but it turned out that because he was 10 minutes late for lockup last night, the staff grounded him for the entire weekend. He can't even leave the ward, and the only phones are down the hallway. As a result, he couldn't even phone his lawyer as scheduled. This cruel treatment by the staff is seriously debilitating to Randy's mental recovery and physical because of this stress. He only wanted to see me for a few minutes when I visited this afternoon and did not want me to return this evening. He is that depressed. What makes this so awful is that this is the only weekend he would have been able to spend some free time with me before I return to San Francisco on Wednesday, the 23rd. April 20th, 1985. Another patient, gay vet Bill Gladman, Ward 2D East, same ward as Randy's, also has much to say about hospital abuse, including gay discrimination. He will be glad to speak to any reporters. April 22nd, 1985. I phoned Sally Burton's office this morning, approximately 9:45 a.m., to speak with her aide, Michael Moran, who said I could come to his office to pick up a copy of his letter to Mr. Custis, National Director of the VA hospitals. I couldn't reach him, and no one in the office knew about the letter. So when I dropped over at noon, the secretary told me he was at a meeting, but that she conveyed my message to him. He still did not leave a copy of that letter for me to pick up. I left a memo for Mr. Moran to send a copy of this letter to my address in San Francisco and to Randy at the VA hospital in D.C. April 28, 1985. My return to SF, April 24th to now. Since my return, the Randy Taylor Committee has formed as part of the Alexander Hamilton Veterans Association. This was accomplished without my knowledge. They phoned me, and I gave them all my notes from D.C. Someone from this committee may be in D.C. now to help Randy. The Alexander Hamilton Veterans Association has recently become the first gay post, number 448, of the American Legion. You can speak with the Sergeant of Arms, Patsy Savino, regarding Randy Taylor Committee. You can also speak with the first Vice Commander, Bob Basker, or with another member, Joe Caratanuto. I believe that Randy Taylor is being persecuted because of his ideals, his political activism, and his sexual orientation. I have never before witnessed such great suffering in one man. He could die or crack under the pressure of this persecution at any moment. I have been sending Randy cards and letters of support every day since January 16th, the day he shot himself, and still am. You have my permission to ask Randy for copies of these letters. And that's it. All done.
How up to date is that? Is he still alive?
I don't know. He probably died in 92.
Oh, so then he's probably not still alive then.
These letters were handwritten in 1985. This marked my my hero's quest that has never ended. This is like one of the most, or the most important thing I've ever done in or with my life. And I don't have cachet. I don't have glamour about me like other people do who do these heroic things and get recognized and known, and they get their books published and stuff. This is a story of a borderline schizophrenic person doing the damn best he can. And I think in that way it's also a fantastic tale. Looking at the face of abject failure and misery as the likely outcome, but nonetheless moving forward. I learned that from Carl Jung as well as from Randolph Taylor, and later on from Larkin.
Was Larkin also a veteran?
I don't think so. His spirit and Randolph's overlap very strongly in my world, although they never knew each other. Larkin's much younger. Well, Larkin's 55 now. But Larkin very much respected my dedication to a gay non-vet, whereas most of the time I was spit upon and joked at by many people in the gay community. Not to say that there weren't some that I don't know about who know about me that once in a while appear in my life out of the blue. I don't know who they are, thanking me profusely for all my good work for the gay community without recognition. And that was just clues to know that I am known. It's just in a very weird, secretive way, even secret unto myself. And I like to joke about this. Oh, so I am San Francisco's best-kept secret, even to myself.
Well, if you don't toot your own horn, who the hell will toot it for you?
I know. It's been sitting around here gathering dust, so I have to toot it once in a while.
You just put it the right way in, because if you do it the other way around, everybody looks tiny.
Well, yeah. Well, the difficult thing with me, with my homeless outreach I've been doing, for decades, is that these people, my friends, they don't take the time to get to know about my situation with Randy. They don't really understand what I do on the computer in my activism and stuff, and it's like very frustrating. And they don't want to, in the past, a couple of my homeless friends loved for me to read some of my tales and stuff. These guys don't want to do any of that, or like, I hardly have enough time to see them. They go somewhere else. They're short attention span, which is understandable. I mean, not just because some of them take meth, but because of the stress of living out in the streets and dealing with a very high-pressure existence.
Right, speaking of which, your friend with the dog, the pictures that you sent of...
Zach?
Yeah, I didn't see the dog in the latest picture. Did he lose the dog?
The dog was lying down next to him.
Oh.
No, he gave up the dog. He found it a good home. Well, I saw this coming because I knew there would be just too much stress for him, worrying about what if he gets arrested, what's going to happen to his dog. They'll probably gas it or whatever. Or if the dog gets ill, he can't afford the care because the veterinarian services for the homeless are very sparse. They'll neuter it for free and give the shots and the license tags, but they won't even chip it for you unless you got $50. And so if the dog was sick and needed treatment, he could afford it. And he found some very nice people who have a big yard, and they just love the dog.
Really? It didn't go to some... He told you that, or you know for a fact? Because sometimes people tell kids that it went to a farm upstate, and what they really mean is that it had to die.
That's exactly what he said. He said, I gave him to the farm.
Okay. Well, he's trying to spare your feelings then.
Well, what would be the point of my bringing it up anyway? He raised the dog wonderfully. I mean that dog was amazing. But I saw this coming. But yes, I realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, my mother used to tell me things like that, not necessarily about the dog, but she would make up little stories. And later on, I figured it out that this is the sort of thing that she would do. Like every once in a while, even today, she'll hand me something and she'll say, "This used to be your grandfather's. This was your grandfather's pair of pliers." You know, of course it wasn't, but I think it's a little game that she's playing because the corner of her mouth turns up a little bit. I think she knows that. I know that it's, this little thing that she does. This scarf used to. This was your grandfather's Knights of Columbus sweater. This nice, pretty sweater. Would you, So maybe I'll use the sweater. You see, because if she says it that way.
Yeah. Well, Zach is such a good person. He came from a low middle class family in New Orleans, and the neighborhood started to go downhill. A lot of very poor blacks and gun shooting everywhere. And his mom started to he lived with his mom. His mom started to take to drinking. It was just driving her nuts. She knew they had to get out of there. And then the economic collapse happened in 2007. She had to sell the home for a huge loss. And this is what led to his being homeless. And yet his best friends are all black people on the streets, and he helps them out. They are less well off than he is psychologically and sometimes physically, and he's so good to them and makes a little team on the streets to help collect bottles and cans. He is so good to them. You just see how much they love him and need him. He's an amazing man. So when he does things about the dog or whatever, when he said he brought the farm, he's letting me know what really happened. I'm not going to push things any further on these things.
Okay,
we've
all
known
right,
each other now. We've been good friends for 7 years now.
Didn't mean to cast aspersions on your relationship. I just thought it was clever and funny, and usually when I think that, I've made a mistake, but it came out of my mouth before I could stop myself from saying it. Yeah,
well, having homeless friends is a heartbreak, especially when I'm not supported like a social worker would or someone volunteering through a church. I don't have loving people to come home to or a stable financial life or whatever. So it's particularly hard, yeah.
And you don't have a grant from the city to do this. Like some of the people around here, you might have been reading about in the Anderson Valley Advertiser about the hospitality house in Fort Bragg and all of the political machinations.
Boy, that place sounds like a real house of horrors.
Yeah, it sounds like a little more of a house of horrors than it actually is, but I don't know anything about it, so what do I know,
Yeah, well, I know that if I lose this place and I have to resort to social services to hopefully find me a place, the best I'm probably going to get is some crummy room in the Tenderloin surrounded, with people living, drug addicts and crazy people, and I don't know how long I'd last.
With a bathroom down at the end of the hall. That's where you have to be in case there's some kind of pterogenesis event happening, like in a science fiction story. That's where you have to be in order to come into your superpowers for the first time.
Well, what are the chances I have a choice of which room, which
superpower you get? If you get a useless power, then it's worse than a power. It just causes trouble for you and the people around you. If you can't control your power and it's a good power, that's even worse sometimes.
Yeah. Well, anyways, my life sucks, but so does everyone else's.
Yeah, well, you're doing good work, and I appreciate that you call and read your story. If you send me what you want me to read next week, I'll read it. But you know my limitations. I'm not sure why I couldn't figure it out last week, but I just couldn't figure it out. I tried, and then I had to stop. I think
that the several URLs at the top of the beginning threw you off.
Yeah, I don't know what to. It's
well, it was an unusual story in that the description of the images of the gift, the pictures of the gift, was the story.
That would have been enough.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll think a little harder next time I feel like I'm getting confused.
Don't worry about it. It was great reliving that time visiting him in D.C. It was extraordinarily painful, excruciating. Very dark things happened outside of my situation with Randolph. I'll give you one example. I would take the rail, the light rail, whatever it was, underground, in D.C. to leave. Like one night I was leaving the hospital, I just caught the last train for the night, and suddenly it just stopped, and it was dark outside, and the driver stepped out of his booth and came up to me, and he looked really pale, and he was a black dude, so he looked really pale, like he saw a ghost. He said, "Excuse me, could you do me a favor?" And he was kind of chumming. He said, "Could you look out the window and see what you see out there?" It was really dark, and I squinted and squinted, and I said, "It looks like you ran over a body." And he did.
Okay.
Someone had committed suicide. Of course, I didn't know it was Randolph either, so I had to wait till tomorrow to find out. So, I'm laughing at it now.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm going to start reading things out loud myself again. I'm going to start with a little music.
I can't get the Wi-Fi to work, so I have to wait to download the podcast tomorrow night.
That'll work. I don't think there's any problem in that direction. The only problem I was having is what I described to you before. I'm on KNYO tonight, but not on KMEC, and we'll get that fixed before next week comes.
Okay. Continue having a great show.
Ezekiel J. Kralin, thank you for participating in our little game, and we'll send you along a copy of the home game so that you can play at home with your family and friends.
It's a pleasure and an honor. Bye.
Bye-bye.